Chapter 1: The Birth of a New Assassin. The night air was thick with smoke, the scent of blood and burning homes wafting across the charred remains of the village. In the distant skies, the capital's banners fluttered, a grim reminder of the Empire's ever-present reach. This small, nameless village, once home to hardworking farmers and craftspeople, now lay in ruins, a graveyard for the dreams of the innocent. Somewhere among the debris, a faint cry pierced the silence. A lone child, barely old enough to walk, wailed beside the still bodies of his parents. His bright blue eyes, tear-filled, shone like stars amidst the devastation. His name was Naruto. For anyone who happened to pass by, Naruto's survival would seem like a cruel joke played by fate. His parents, like many others in the village, had been slaughtered in an imperial raid. His mother, with her striking red hair, had died shielding him from the final blow that claimed her life. His father had fought valiantly to the end, but one man against an army was a battle with a foregone conclusion. The child cried, his voice hoarse and trembling as the realization that no one would come to save him settled in. No one in the village was left alive. The Empire had shown no mercy. 2 days later, a group of shadows moved silently through the remains of the village. Dressed in dark cloaks, these men and women were not scavengers but assassins, a detachment from the Revolutionary Army, sent to gather intelligence on the Empire's latest movements. Their leader, a tall man with cold, calculating eyes, surveyed the wreckage with the air of someone used to seeing death. "This village, just like the others," one of his subordinates muttered, kicking aside a burnt wooden beam. "The Empire's getting more reckless." "More desperate," the leader corrected. His gaze swept over the bodies littering the ground, but something caught his attention, a movement in the distance. A child. A toddler, to be exact. Somehow, amidst the chaos, this small boy had survived, clutching his mother's lifeless body with all the strength his tiny hands could muster. He wasn't crying anymore, his face tear-streaked but silent, staring with wide, vacant eyes at nothing. "Captain," one of the subordinates said in disbelief. "There's a kid. He's still alive." The leader approached, his heavy boots crunching on the charred ground. He knelt down, studying the boy closely. The child didn't flinch or move, his bright blue eyes locking with the assassin's. "What do we do with him?" another assassin asked. The captain remained silent for a long moment, staring into those haunting eyes. "We take him with us." Naruto grew up far from the comforts of a loving family. The Revolutionary Army wasn't exactly a place for children, but the boy had proven resilient. The captain, a man known only by the codename Reiju, took him in, seeing something in those piercing blue eyes that spoke of potential, something more than just a scared orphan. Reiju wasn't the nurturing type, but in a way, that suited Naruto just fine. He was taught early on that the world was cruel, that survival meant strength, and that to fight the Empire, one had to be willing to kill without hesitation. By the time Naruto was 7, he had already begun basic training. His small frame belied his astonishing stamina, and he learned quickly. His teachers, hardened assassins, were merciless, pushing him beyond the limits any child should endure. But Naruto endured. He always endured. At night, when the others slept, Naruto would lie awake, staring at the stars through the cracks in the ceiling. The memories of that fateful night still haunted him, the faces of his parents, the heat of the flames, the coldness of their unmoving bodies. But as time went on, the memories began to fade, replaced by the cold reality of his new life. Reiju had once told him that those who let the past weigh them down would die in this world, and Naruto had taken those words to heart. He couldn't afford to be weak. One evening, as Naruto sat sharpening his kunai by the flickering fire, Reiju approached. His expression was unreadable, as it often was, but Naruto had learned to pick up on the subtle changes in his mentor's demeanor. Something was different tonight. "You're ready," Reiju said simply, sitting down beside him. Naruto didn't respond right away, focusing on the blade in his hand. He had known this day was coming. "Ready for what?" Reiju's cold eyes glanced toward the horizon. "Your first mission." The target was a minor imperial officer stationed at a small outpost near the outskirts of the capital. The man had gained a reputation for cruelty, overseeing the forced relocation of several villages and executing those who resisted without a second thought. It was a simple mission by most standards, an assassination. Infiltrate, eliminate the target, and leave no trace behind. Naruto was not alone. 2 others from the Revolutionary Army would accompany him, both veterans, seasoned killers who had taken lives without so much as blinking. Naruto, on the other hand, had never killed before. His training had been brutal, yes, but simulated combat was a far cry from actually taking a life. Still, he kept his fears to himself. Showing weakness wasn't an option. As they approached the outpost under the cover of night, Naruto's heart pounded in his chest. The plan was straightforward: the veterans would take out the guards, and Naruto would finish the officer while he slept. Simple. Clean. Quick. But as they moved into position, something felt off. The stillness of the night was unnerving, the silence pressing down on him like a weight. He couldn't help but glance at his comrades, searching for some sign that they felt it too, but their expressions remained stone-cold, focused. They reached the walls of the outpost with ease, scaling them in silence. The guards were dispatched without a sound, their throats slit in the darkness. Naruto watched in awe and slight horror as his comrades moved with practiced precision, their faces devoid of emotion as they took lives in the blink of an eye. His stomach churned. Now, it was his turn. They slipped into the officer's quarters, where the man lay sleeping, unaware of the death creeping toward him. Naruto stood at the foot of the bed, his kunai gripped tightly in his hand. The officer's chest rose and fell with each breath, his face peaceful, almost serene. For a moment, Naruto hesitated. This man had done terrible things. He had ordered the deaths of innocent people, destroyed families, and yet, seeing him now, so vulnerable, Naruto felt a strange pang of guilt. "Do it," one of his comrades hissed from behind, their voice low and urgent. "Finish him." Naruto's hand trembled as he raised the kunai. His heart raced, his mind screaming at him to stop, to turn back, too. But there was no turning back. With a single, swift motion, Naruto plunged the blade into the officer's chest. The man's eyes shot open, his mouth opening in a silent scream as blood spilled from the wound. He convulsed violently, his hands clawing at the air, his eyes wide with terror. Naruto could feel the warmth of the blood on his hands, could hear the gurgling sound of the officer's breath as he choked on his own blood. It felt like an eternity, but in reality, it was over in seconds. The officer's body went limp, his eyes glassy and unseeing. Naruto stumbled back, his chest heaving, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He had done it. He had taken a life. But there was no sense of victory, no satisfaction. Only a cold, hollow emptiness. As they made their escape, Naruto's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. His comrades congratulated him on a job well done, their voices distant and muffled, as if they were speaking from underwater. He barely registered their words. All he could think about was the officer's eyes, the way they had stared at him, pleading for life in those final moments. Back at the camp, Reiju was waiting. His expression remained as unreadable as ever as Naruto approached, still covered in the officer's blood. "You did well," Reiju said, his tone as cold as ice. "You're one step closer to becoming a true assassin." Naruto stared at him, feeling a knot of unease tighten in his chest. He wanted to say something, to ask if this was what it was always like, if the feeling of emptiness would ever go away, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he simply nodded, his eyes downcast. That night, as Naruto lay in his bed, sleep refused to come. He could still feel the blood on his hands, the weight of the kunai as it pierced flesh, the officer's dying gaze burned into his memory. He wondered if this was what his life would be from now on, endless bloodshed and hollow victories. And for the first time, Naruto truly understood the darkness of the world he had been born into. Days passed after Naruto's first kill, but the weight of it lingered, settling into his chest like a permanent stone. The Revolutionary Army's camp, normally filled with the sound of training and quiet murmurs of strategy, felt suffocating now. Every face he passed seemed indifferent, as though none of them had seen or felt what he had. Death, it seemed, was an accepted routine for them. Naruto found himself withdrawing more into his own thoughts. At night, he lay awake, unable to push the memory of that officer's last moments from his mind. The gurgling sound of the man drowning in his own blood echoed in the quiet spaces of Naruto's mind, each replay sharpening the dread coiled in his gut. "You're one step closer to becoming a true assassin." Reiju's words were meant to be reassuring, but they only deepened Naruto's internal turmoil. He wasn't sure if that was what he wanted to be. Yet he had no choice. His world had long since dictated the path he would walk, and this was it. Hesitation meant death. One evening, as he sat alone near the edge of the camp sharpening his kunai, Naruto's closest comrade, Kana, joined him. She was one of the few in the camp who actually treated him like a person rather than a tool, a bright spark of warmth in the otherwise cold world of the Revolutionary Army. Kana had joined the revolution after the empire slaughtered her family, but despite the tragedy, she still found ways to smile, a flicker of hope amidst all the darkness. "Still thinking about it?" Kana asked quietly, sitting next to him on the hard ground. Her voice was soft, knowing. Naruto didn't answer at first. He just continued to sharpen his blade, the rhythm steady, almost mechanical. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think it would feel like this." Kana let out a quiet sigh, her gaze shifting toward the horizon, where the setting sun cast long shadows across the trees. "It never feels right the first time," she admitted. "Or the second. Maybe not even the third. But after a while, you stop thinking about it." Naruto looked up at her, his eyes wide. "Is that what we're supposed to do? Stop thinking about it?" She turned to face him, her eyes soft but serious. "I don't know, Naruto. We do what we have to do. If we think about it too much, we won't be able to do it at all. And if we can't fight, then the Empire wins." She paused for a moment, her expression faltering slightly. "I don't like it either. But sometimes we have to make choices we don't want to make. It's the world we live in." Naruto's grip tightened on the kunai. He wanted to argue, to say there had to be another way. But the truth was, deep down, he knew she was right. The Empire wouldn't stop. They wouldn't just leave people alone. To fight them meant accepting the things he would have to do. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like if things were different?" Naruto asked, his voice soft, almost fragile. Kana smiled, but there was sadness behind it. "Every day." Weeks passed, and Naruto threw himself into his training, determined to suppress the conflicting emotions that gnawed at him. The camp had grown busier, whispers of new missions circulated among the assassins, each one more dangerous than the last. The Empire's grip on the land was tightening, and the Revolutionary Army was feeling the pressure. Reiju, ever the calculating leader, had been assigned to carry out another assassination, this time, a more high-profile target, General Akatsu, a man known for his ruthless enforcement of imperial law in the outer villages. Akatsu's forces had wiped out several resistance cells in recent months, leaving a trail of bodies in their wake. Taking him down was critical. Naruto had expected to be left out of this mission, given its complexity. He was still new, still grappling with his first kill. But Reiju had other plans. "You're coming with us," Reiju said bluntly one evening, his eyes cold and unreadable as ever. Naruto looked up from his training, momentarily caught off guard. "But I..." "This is no different from what you've already done," Reiju interrupted. "Akatsu is responsible for more deaths than you can imagine. He deserves what's coming." Naruto's gut twisted, but he nodded. He couldn't argue with that logic. Akatsu was a monster. Even Naruto knew that. But still, something felt off. The journey to the outskirts of the capital was tense, each step heavy with anticipation. Reiju, Naruto, Kana, and two other seasoned assassins moved silently through the dense forest, their movements perfectly coordinated. Naruto could feel the weight of his kunai strapped to his leg, the familiar cold steel against his skin. But this time it felt heavier somehow, as if it knew what was coming. As they approached their target, a small outpost where Akatsu was stationed temporarily, Naruto's heart began to pound in his chest. His hands were steady, but inside, his thoughts raced. He glanced at Kana, who gave him a reassuring nod. She had faith in him. He could do this. He had to. They waited until nightfall, slipping through the shadows like wraiths. The outpost was lightly guarded, and their approach was swift, deadly. The guards at the perimeter were taken down in seconds, their throats slit before they could even raise an alarm. It was methodical, precise, everything Reiju had trained them for. Naruto's role, once again, was to finish the job. Ikatsu, the man who had slaughtered entire villages without a second thought, lay in his quarters, oblivious to the death closing in on him. As Naruto crept closer, his kunai ready, his mind flickered back to that first mission, the officer's dying eyes, the blood on his hands. He swallowed hard, forcing the memories down. This was different, he told himself. Ikatsu wasn't just some officer. He was a monster. Killing him would save countless lives. It was the right thing to do. But as he stepped into the room, the faint light from a flickering candle casting long shadows on the walls, something wasn't right. Ikatsu wasn't sleeping. Naruto froze, his eyes widening in alarm. The general was sitting at a desk, fully awake, his back to the door. He was writing something, his pen scratching against parchment, completely unaware of Naruto's presence. But there was something unsettling about the scene, something that made Naruto's skin crawl. He hesitated, unsure of what to do. He was supposed to kill Ikatsu, but this didn't feel like the right moment. It felt too easy. Too quiet. And then, in the stillness, Ikatsu spoke. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Naruto's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't made a sound, how could Ikatsu know he was there? Slowly, the general turned in his chair, his eyes dark and cold, a cruel smile curling at the edges of his lips. "The Revolutionary Army's been trying to kill me for months. I've been waiting for this moment." Naruto's heart raced. Something was wrong. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Ikatsu was supposed to be asleep, defenseless. But now, he was staring straight at Naruto, his expression eerily calm. "You think you're doing the right thing, don't you?" Ikatsu continued, his voice low and mocking. "Killing for your so-called revolution. But tell me, kid, how many lives have you saved with your little assassination games? Or are you just adding to the body count?" Naruto gritted his teeth, his grip tightening on the kunai. He wasn't going to let Ikatsu get inside his head. "Shut up," Naruto growled, stepping forward. Ikatsu's smile widened. "You're just like all the others. Desperate. Clinging to some idea of justice. But in the end, all you're doing is playing in the mud. Killing, it changes you. And not in the way you think." Before Naruto could react, Ikatsu moved. Faster than Naruto anticipated, the general's hand shot out, knocking the kunai from Naruto's grasp. In the same fluid motion, Ikatsu drew a blade from his side, slashing toward Naruto's throat. Naruto barely had time to dodge, the blade slicing through the air, just inches from his neck. He stumbled back, his heart pounding, his mind racing. Ikatsu wasn't just a general, he was a warrior, trained and deadly. The general lunged again, and Naruto had no choice but to retreat, desperately searching for an opening. His kunai lay on the ground, just out of reach, but Ikatsu was too fast. Naruto could barely keep up with his movements, each strike coming closer and closer to finding its mark. This wasn't like the officer. This was real combat. And Naruto was losing. Just as Ikatsu's blade came down again, aiming for Naruto's chest, there was a flash of steel. Kana appeared out of the shadows, her blade intercepting Ikatsu's in a violent clash of sparks. She pushed him back, her expression fierce. "Naruto," she shouted, her voice urgent. "Get up." Naruto scrambled to his feet, his breath ragged, his body shaking. But there was no time for hesitation. He retrieved his kunai, his hands trembling as he gripped it tightly, watching as Kana and General Ikatsu circled each other, their weapons raised. The tension in the room was suffocating, the sound of their breathing the only noise that cut through the thick air. Kana was quick, faster than Akatsu in some ways, but the general was stronger, and his experience showed with each swing of his blade. Their clash sent sparks flying, metal ringing against metal, and Naruto could see the strain in Kana's movements. She was holding her own, but just barely. "Naruto," she called again, her voice strained as she parried another vicious strike from Akatsu. "You need to finish this. Now." Naruto's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing. This wasn't how he imagined the mission going. He wasn't ready for a direct fight, especially not with someone like Akatsu. But there was no time to think, no time to hesitate. Kana couldn't hold him off forever. Naruto's grip tightened on the kunai as he circled behind Akatsu, his eyes darting to find an opening. The general's attention was focused on Kana, his movements aggressive, but controlled. Every time Kana dodged or deflected an attack, it was clear she was losing ground. Her breathing was labored, her strikes becoming slower. "This is it," Naruto thought. "If I don't act now." He lunged forward, aiming for Akatsu's back. But at the last second, the general spun, his cold eyes locking onto Naruto. With a vicious backhand, Akatsu sent Naruto sprawling to the floor, his kunai clattering out of his hand. "You're nothing but a child," Akatsu sneered, turning back to Kana. "A child playing assassin. How many of your comrades do you think will die because you're too weak to do what needs to be done?" Naruto's chest heaved as he struggled to get to his feet, blood dripping from a cut on his cheek where Akatsu had struck him. The world around him blurred for a moment, but Kana's cry of pain snapped him back to reality. Kana staggered backward, blood seeping from a deep wound in her side. She clutched it, her face contorted in pain, but she didn't fall. Instead, she gritted her teeth, her eyes blazing with determination. "You talk too much," she hissed, forcing herself to stand tall, despite the injury. Akatsu's smile was cruel. "Bravery won't save you." As the general moved in for the final blow, Naruto felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, his chance. With Kana wounded, Akatsu's focus was entirely on her, and he was about to make his fatal mistake. Naruto scrambled for his kunai, ignoring the pain in his body. His fingers wrapped around the handle, just as Akatsu raised his blade for a finishing strike. Time seemed to slow as Naruto leaped forward, putting everything he had into the motion. With a desperate shout, he drove the kunai into Akatsu's back, the blade sinking deep between the general's ribs. Akatsu gasped, his body stiffening as the pain registered, his eyes going wide in shock. For a moment, everything was still. Then Akatsu let out a low, wet gurgle, blood bubbling up from his mouth as he staggered forward, his hand instinctively reaching for the wound. Naruto twisted the blade, his heart racing, as Akatsu dropped to his knees, his body trembling. Kana stepped forward, her expression cold and resolute, despite the pain. Without a word, she drove her sword through Akatsu's chest, ending it. The general's body slumped forward, lifeless. Naruto stood frozen for a moment, staring at the blood on his hands, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. His breath came in ragged gasps, his mind spinning. He had done it. He had killed Akatsu. But there was no sense of triumph, only a hollow emptiness, just like before. Kana dropped to her knees beside him, clutching her side, her face pale, but still managing a faint smile. "You did it, Naruto." He nodded, though the words barely registered. His body felt heavy, like all the strength had been drained from him in those final moments. The image of Akatsu's eyes, wide with shock and pain, burned in his mind. The mission was over, but the cost was greater than he had imagined. Back at the Revolutionary Army camp, Reiju waited for their return. The night was quiet, save for the crackling of the fire that illuminated the somber faces of the assassins gathered around it. Naruto and Kana had barely made it back, Kana's injury requiring immediate attention. Reiju's expression, as always, was unreadable when they finally reported the mission's success. "Akatsu is dead," he said simply, his tone neither praising nor condemning. Naruto barely reacted, his body numb. The bloodstains on his clothes were still fresh, the weight of the kunai in his hand still a reminder of what he had done. Kana had been taken to the medical tent, her condition stable, but fragile. Reiju studied him for a moment, his cold eyes searching Naruto's face. "You're learning." It wasn't a compliment. It was just a statement of fact. Naruto wasn't sure what he felt about it. He wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he nodded silently and turned away, heading back to his tent. That night, as Naruto lay in the darkness, the reality of his new life settled over him like a shroud. The revolutionary army would never stop. The empire would never stop. And that meant neither could he. There would always be another target, another mission, another life to take. Each death would push him further into the darkness, and there was no escaping it now. He had chosen this path. Or maybe it had chosen him. As sleep finally took him, the image of Akatsu's dying eyes lingered in his mind, a reminder that in this world, survival came at a cost. A cost he wasn't sure he could bear for much longer. End of chapter 1. Make sure you like and subscribe and tell me if you like this story. Bye and have a nice day.